Today we'll be reviewing U2's show at the Sphere in Las Vegas. Then we'll be discussing injuries in youth athletes. This is Doctor vs. Comedian. I'm Dr. Asif Doja, and this is the Doctor of Laughs.
Not a real doctor.
Ali Hassan. Every episode I pick a topic for Ali from comedy and entertainment, and I question him about it. Then Ali picks a topic from medicine and health and grills me on that topic. Today, I'll be reviewing my experience seeing U2 in concert at the Sphere in Las Vegas. And then we'll be discussing injuries in young athletes.
You know, Asif, you start this off by saying grilling. Ali grills me. I will be grilling you on why the hell we're talking about U2 again. But apparently, and I'm going to say apparently and allegedly, a number of people, you would call a uncomfortably high number of people, have asked you about that U2 concert in Vegas that you attended. And so apparently we need to talk about it. It better be good. That's all I'm going to say.
Well,
right? Because
it's
been too many years of me hearing you talk about U2.
I know, I do feel bad. This is the second time this year we've talked about U2. And again, I wasn't really going to talk about this, but I did mention I was going to the concert a couple of weeks ago on the podcast. And then I went. And as Ali said, a lot of people have been messaging me, asking me about it.
And I hope those a lot of people are listening and appreciating this, because I certainly am not. So let's just get that up there.
That's mean. And
I saw your pictures. I saw the pictures you sent me. Love them. Very cool. And that's kind of where it ends for me. So you better bring your A game today, Asif.
And of course, in our second half, now that's actually something Ali wants to talk about, because we've talked a lot about these repetitive use injuries and other kinds of injuries in young athletes. Ali and I have talked about that offline, so he wanted to talk about that formally on the podcast.
There's a massive, massive scam happening. So you went to see this concert in Las Vegas in the month of November, right? So your Bruce Springsteen was put on hold.
Yeah, that's actually true. Bruce Springsteen was put on hold because of his medical issues. We talked about that in a previous episode. So my concert was postponed till November 2024.
Yeah, okay. So that's good. That gives us a year. And in a year, God willing, we will hear you talk about that concert.
Yes.
But this concert is something you say worth talking about. And definitely people. And also, is this the concert that they're doing all over North America, or this is specific to Vegas?
This is specific to Vegas for now.
Okay.
Because it's at this very special location.
And that location is called the Sphere.
Yes, not the Spear, which Ali called it earlier on today. Good God. Ridiculous. Okay, so hopefully people have seen this sphere, because it is quite amazing. This is a literal sphere that is in the middle of Las Vegas. It's built by a company called Sphere Entertainment Company, which is a sister company to Madison Square Garden Entertainments, based out of New York City. The total cost for this sphere, $2.3 billion. It was much less beforehand, and it kept skyrocketing over time.
Okay.
The idea is this is a kind of venue that's going to hold 4 to 6 residencies a year. They've also done some other things. They have a film by Darren Aronofsky. We all know Darren Aronofsky, the famous film director. He has a film, A Postcard from Earth, which is playing there. It started on October 6th. Apparently it's amazing. I didn't see it. The venue of the Sphere is 366 feet high, 516 feet wide at its broadest point. It's the largest spherical building in the world, and it can seat 18,600 people in the seats. But if you include standing room for general admission, it's 20,000. The key with this is the interior and exterior is all LED lights, and it's actually designed by a Canadian company called Sacco Technologies, based in Montreal. And that's their specialization, is LED video displays. So the interior has 16K video resolution and this wraparound screen that is 160,000 square feet. So it's the largest and highest resolution LED screen that exists in the world. Then the exterior also has LEDs on it with 1.2 million hockey puck size LEDs on the outside.
Why do you need that on the exterior?
So again, we can link to some links. So the outside is a sphere that they can project anything on it. So during the basketball playoffs, there'll be a basketball. And so it looks like there's a basketball. There was a big eyeball that was looking around Las Vegas.
So it won't be what's happening inside. That would be insane. That would cannibalize sales. Okay. It would be
exactly.
Yeah.
So this is like a state-of-the-art concert venue. So if you can imagine, if you're inside at the concert venue, the sphere is kind of bisected in half by the seats, and then there's the stage and screen kind of in front of it. The speakers are all behind the LED screens in the sphere. So you don't see any speakers, in front of you. They're all behind the speakers, and there's 164,000 speakers. And so you don't even see the speakers when you're there. And there's also what's called haptic technology. So I didn't experience this during the concert. I don't know if my seat didn't have it or they just didn't turn it on. So haptics is like the seat vibrates or whatever. There's also, 4D stuff with like smells and stuff like that. So you can smell Bono's sweat. No, I'm just joking. But the haptics apparently for Darren Aronofsky's film, there's an elephant, which a bull elephant is running towards the screen, and then you hear this pounding as it approaches, and then you start feeling the vibration in your seats. So you feel the experience. So apparently that's what.
How hilarious would it be if Bono gets on stage and pulls up the mic, and then there's like feedback, like after $2.6 billion.
Dude, I have to tell you this.
No.
There was some feedback.
Oh my God.
Behind us for a couple of songs.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. Yes. Overall, the sound was great. It is a bit like, I'm like kind of getting into the meat of it here, but I thought that the sound mixing, like the drum should have been slightly higher, the way coming through the speakers. There may be a reason for that, which I'll talk about in a second. There was a bit of very slight high-pitched feedback for a couple songs. I don't know why, but I would say for maybe 2 or 3 songs. Yeah.
What an outrage. Okay, tell me this. This thing just opened and U2 is the first band to perform in it. And is it a residency? They're there for like multiple weeks?
Yeah, they were there for September to December, and then they just extended it for January, February.
Oh, wow. And they're performing every night?
They do like, I think Wednesday to Sunday maybe, or sometimes less than that.
Okay.
So not the full week. And then it's no opening act, it's just them. And people may ask, like, why U2, right? Because this technology is so amazing. You need a band that can not just perform well live, but has that idea of technology and knows how to utilize some of these things. And there's not a lot of bands that do that are using technology to this level. I'm sure there are some pop stars like Taylor Swift who's doing this, but in terms of bands, U2 is one of them. Pink Floyd back in the day, Peter Gabriel, but I think they want a big band and a band that could utilize this technology to kind of maximize it, right? And problem with U2 is they committed to this several years ago, pre-pandemic. The problem is that Larry Mullen Jr., who is their drummer, had to have surgery. We talked about that in a podcast earlier on this year. So he's off, recuperating. So they had to hire a new drummer. And so he filled in. So I do wonder if the reason why the drums aren't quite as loud at some things is because they don't want to give, emphasis to...
You're not Larry.
Yeah.
I made him sound like Abe Simpson there, Bono. You're not Larry. That'd be weird to sabotage even your guest drummer. Like, it's about the experience for the people, I imagine. Who else is scheduled to perform there?
No one yet.
No one yet.
And again, this is a bit of a spoiler for later. I can't imagine it would be very hard for another band to top what they did. It's like so unbelievable. I don't know how they'll do it. It's a good challenge to
listeners, you write to us and you tell us which bands would have no trouble following.
Again, there are better bands, like live bands, like the Foo Fighters, for example, Bruce Springsteen, which we talked about. I mean, these guys will perform probably a better musical concert. I don't think we can argue with that. But, I've seen Bruce Springsteen and, it's just when you watch it's him, and on the video screens, it's his band. Like, that's it. There's nothing else. Same with Foo Fighters. So how do you incorporate all the other stuff? That's the question, right?
Yeah, I think you're leaving out different genres of music that you're not as familiar with, pop and country.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
These have got to be a hot ticket. How did these come into your hands?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me how you got tickets. It's possible to get tickets. They do have, like, when the tickets go on sale, you can enter into a lottery and then you can buy the tickets. That is possible. And then of course, you can get them aftermarket as well, which costs a pretty penny. There is, though, I checked because I thought this question might come up. When we were sitting down in the seats, I looked on like StubHub or Vivid Seats, these aftermarket ticket resellers, and there were tons of seats available, like right when the show was starting, for like $300. So, this is not nothing, like they're not nothing, but there's a way. If you just go to Las Vegas there, I'm sure you can buy tickets the day of on the secondary market. Will those tickets be a scam? I mean, sometimes they are. It's a chance you take on buying secondary market tickets. Usually, I've bought lots of tickets on the secondary market. I've never had them be a scam, but it doesn't mean
I mean,
can't
you
be.
didn't go to Vegas and just say, "I'll just do this," right? You
Absolutely
didn't
not.
leave it to chance.
No,
You're too much of a
absolutely
planner for
not.
that.
Yeah, absolutely not. But people I know, people like, oh, you can buy a package where you get a hotel and a concert ticket. And some of those, when you think about how some of the tickets might be expensive, that may be a good deal for some people. Now, I'll tell you something interesting that happened. When the tickets went on sale, I was looking on the aftermarket, and there was a bunch that were pretty cheap. And I'm like, why are these tickets so cheap? Then if you look in the fine print, it says obstructed or limited view. But I'm like, this is a brand new concert facility. How is that possible? So basically, they made an error. So you have to kind of picture this in your head. You have different levels, 300 level, 200 level, 100 level. They're all on top of each other, though, in a sense, because it's like half of a sphere. Like you bisect the sphere diagonally, it's like one on top of the other, and then in front of them is the stage. But there's an overhang where the 200 level overhangs the 100 level. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so about half the seats in the 100 level have this overhang. But remember, it's a 360 sphere. That's the screen in front of you.
Oh, so when they look up, they see the bottom of the 200s.
Exactly. So that was a bit of a major error that occurred. And a lot of people were upset. So they had a choice that they could keep their tickets or get a refund, but they couldn't be guaranteed another one. So, and these are people who bought them legitimately, not even on the secondary market.
Yeah.
And there's also a thing where you can't, if you have a general admission ticket for whatever reason, you cannot sell it on the secondary market. So some people were selling them and they bought them. And then when they got to the venue, they're like, well, you weren't the original purchaser, so you can't get in. And that happened to quite a few people. So there were a few hiccups with regards to the ticketing issue.
And then there's another ticket you can buy, which is very cheap, which is you stand on the outside of the sphere and you're allowed to press your ear up against it. And so you're there, but you're not really there. Well, if I was the sphere owners, I would definitely
You charge for that. That's a cool 100 for that one.
It's just a cool 100. Have 3 drinks in Las Vegas or press your ear up against the sphere for 2.5 hours.
So why don't I tell you about the actual experience of going there and what happened? Because getting something to drink in the place is very interesting. So you walk in, there's lines, but it's all going in is actually pretty straightforward. Entering and then scanning your tickets, it's all relatively straightforward. The problem is the signage on the inside isn't that good. So there's a huge line for the merchandise table, right? Because this is like a limited time thing. People want to get T-shirts, but there's probably like 50.
Did you get one, and how much did it cost?
I did. It was $50.
Oh, that's not
my
bad.
wife. Maybe that'd be
That's
more.
not bad at all.
Yeah.
They could have really
about where
gouged
we've
you.
come with the price of T-shirts at concerts these days.
No, of course. It used to be $15 in the 90s, though. But
Yeah.
T-shirts now are, I think, a reasonable T-shirt if you're supporting, some band or something. 35 to 50. I think 50 is the high end for me personally. But my kids have gone to concerts where T-shirts were $75.
I mean, it's 50 US, but whatever, it's fine.
Americans are not adding the word US, right? They don't. This concert was not created for Canadians, so you don't have to add that. That's sorry. So there's the lineup to get the merch was a bit of a mess.
It was just very funny because there was a huge lineup, and then the people behind me, I was like, this lineup's pretty big. They're like, yeah, we're going to send people off to go find if there's other T-shirt stands around the venue. And then the guy came back, or his friend came back, and he's like, yeah, there's like 15 of them. Like, there's no lineups. So there was poor signage for that. Same thing with if you want to get a drink or a snack or something. Some of the lines are really big, but if you walked elsewhere, they were fine. So it's all state of the art. It's very cool on the inside. There's many, many levels to get to the top. There's like lounges and stuff. It's pretty cool on the inside. Again, everything is brand new in it. Very strange though. Let's see if Ali can figure this out. So before the concert's about to start, it's supposed to start around 8 o'clock.
I can't.
So I'm like, go to the bathroom. And the lineup for the guys' bathroom was so much longer than the lineup for the women's bathroom.
Poo-poo and women were doing pee-pee? I don't know. How am I supposed to know the answer to that?
Well, it's because a lot of men there, and most of the men there at least over 40, if not over 50,
Oh,
if not
that's
over 60.
funny. It's
So,
a
and they're like,
demographics
oh, my
riddle.
prostate, like I need to go to the bathroom right before the show starts. So everybody went at the same time. And of course, you know,
Dude,
they're
as
not.
a guy with the CBC fan following, I should have actually known the answer to that. I
Yeah,
should
there
have
you go.
known.
So it's the only time it's ever happened that the guy's bathroom I've seen like a longer
See,
line than the
I
women.
don't see gender, so that's why I couldn't
There we
answer
go.
that question.
Exactly. So our seats were amazing. They're on the 200 level, right at the front.
No obscured view.
Yeah, so right at the 200, like I think there's one row in front of us. And so the first half hour is this DJ playing like in this car, which has like neon lights on it. Apparently it's from their U2's old Pop Mart tour from the late 90s. I don't remember that. I went to that tour. I don't remember this car, but anyway. And he just plays like kind of 80s and 90s like hits,
Rock?
dance hits.
Dance
No,
hits,
more
okay.
like poppy songs more. And it was a huge waste of time. I should have gone and wandered around the Sphere more. I was like, this is brutal. I like, it was like, so that was about 30 to 40 minutes. So you could easily miss this. There's nothing to see here.
Speaking of nothing to see here, you didn't take your kids, right?
No,
was
just
you
me
and
and my
your
wife and
Yeah.
one of my buddies, yeah. So when you're sitting there after this guy leaves, you're looking at the Sphere on the inside, and it looks like it's a bunch of bricks, like these huge concrete slabs, but that's not what it is. That's a projection. And even if you look up, there's like a skylight, you see birds flying by, you're like, yeah, that's not a real skylight. That is an LED projection. Like that's a, you know, it's a video, but it looks real. Everything looks real. So then U2 comes on stage, and all these bricks kind of crumble and split apart, and you realize that it's a screen, and the enormity of this screen, just you can't explain it. It's crazy. And it's so bright that at certain songs they're playing in the desert. The background is a desert, and it's so bright you feel like you're outside. And if you turn and look at the rest of the concert, everybody is completely lit up. Like you could identify your friend on the other side because the light is so bright and so clear in terms of what's going on. It was basically unbelievable. The whole point of this was they're doing their album from 1991, Achtung Baby, playing it in its entirety. They don't play it in order. They kind of move things around.
Oh, it's just that one album.
No. So what they do is they play the first third of the concert is the one side of the album, essentially. Then they do a middle part where they don't use the back screen as much. They just kind of play on the stage, and they play some really, from my concert, they played some very old songs that you may not have heard in a long time, like from Rattle and Hum. I don't know if you remember When Love Comes to Town, their song with B.B. King.
Yeah, of course I remember. Dude,
But some people don't, and they
that
played
got a lot
songs.
of radio airplay. Come on, man. That was the people.
And
know
they played
that.
Love Rescue Me as well from them. These are songs that they don't play very often anymore, and they haven't played in years, some of them. And so, and then they're picking and choosing different songs. You know, day before we saw them, they played Angel of Harlem. They didn't do it this time. And so it's a bit more stripped down for this. And then the last third is they play the second side, not in order, of Achtung Baby, and then they play a couple of extra songs for various encores, which I won't ruin for people. But you basically get to hear all the hits. Like anything you want to hear, you basically get to hear during this.
Oh, no kidding. But not the stuff that they vowed not to play off War, not their Sunday Bloody Sunday. And
did they vow not to play that?
No, maybe not vow, but there was something in the news about Bono saying like I don't want to play that anymore. You know.
Oh, really? That's interesting. No, apparently they just played Seconds from, Seconds? It's the first track on War, I believe.
Yeah, sure.
They haven't played that in 30 years, I guess. Like,
Okay.
they're really kind of, and then you guys might have heard Lady Gaga joined them for this section, not when I was there, but about a week later she was there, and she joined them, sang a couple songs with them. They sang Shallow.
Oh, I love it.
It's really hard to explain how incredible this was. So the videos are just... The video screen is absolutely amazing. So one time it seems like they're on a lake and there's a lightning storm in the background. Another time there's all these images moving down on the screen. It makes you feel like you're kind of rising up. I can't even explain how it looked. It didn't make people motion sick from what I saw. Like I wasn't, and I didn't look like anybody who was vomiting or anything. So I don't think you should be worried if you have motion sickness. I think it's just such an amazing experience because you're seeing a very good band and some songs that most people know and like. Achtung Baby is an album that most people have heard and like. So if you hate them, don't go see this, like obviously.
But that brings up an interesting thing because your wife is not the U2 lover like you are. Did she enjoy herself?
She did. First of all, she loves this album. And I think a lot of people like that. They may like this album and they may like Joshua Tree, but they're not a huge fan. So, but if that's you and you fall into that category, like, oh yeah, I know these songs, whatever, you will have a great time. She loved it. It's easily the best concert that she's ever seen, the best concert I've ever seen, hands down, because a concert you want, and it's an experience, right? It's similar to what I was saying about Alchemist, that restaurant I went to in Copenhagen, and we talked about a couple episodes ago. It's just such an unbelievable experience, and you're seeing the height of technology. We talked about this structure and the LED. It's like nothing I've ever seen before, and I would 100% go back and do it again.
And it's not filled with a bunch of U2 nerds who are all like, this is the 4th song on their 5th album. Actually, on the limited release edition, it's the 7th song. It's not like people are just enjoying themselves.
I mean, obviously, the tickets are pricey, so it's obviously, you have to be willing to spend that money. There were a few kids there, not a ton. One thing's very interesting is the general admission. Someone asked me about this because they wanted to go. They're like, what about the general admission? So there's two sides to this. The general admission is not that big for a concert, like a U2 kind of arena style concert. So in other words, you're probably going to get closer to U2 even at the back of general admission than you ever have before. It's not like seeing them in a small club, but it's pretty good.
It's also not like a football arena.
Exactly. Yeah. But the problem is that you have to look up all the way up to get to the whole LED experience, right? So in a sense, maybe sitting in the seats is better, but again, a general admission, you're getting close to a band that you probably will never get this close to ever again. So I don't know. Another thing people ask me is what other things could be there? And it's tough. I think concerts for sure, and a residency where you really put a lot of attention into these background and LED details could be amazing. Again, you can be performing anywhere in the world, in quotation marks, with the background that you have and put some very interesting stuff. I think they talked about boxing and MMA. I mean, you could, but then you're just watching it on a big screen, which you could do at, Mandalay Bay or MGM Grand or some of these other places in Las Vegas. So I'm not quite sure what else other than concerts. The venue's amazing. The concert's amazing. I highly recommend, if people have at all the ability or interest, to really try and go. And like I said, there are ways to do it that you could probably do it in a way that's affordable. Or if you just happen to be in Vegas for something else, see about getting tickets that day. It's totally possible.
All right, so we're going to talk about injuries in youth sports, and this shares an element with your story about U2 at the Sphere. Do you know what that common element is?
Because the drummer was injured? Maybe he had repetitive strain injury because of drumming all the time.
I mean, that's a maybe. You'll have to look into that. I cannot confirm or deny that. The common element is your wife, the great Dr. Megan Harrison, who was with you at U2 and is also the reason that I know about these repetitive strain injuries or repetitive stress injuries. It was Megan who told me about this. She told it to me at a time because your daughter is older than my older son by about, I guess, 4 years or something like this. 3 years.
That's like one of those riddles, that
Yeah, it is. It is. If my son leaves a train going west from Berlin and your daughter... Anyway, the point is, at the time, my older son couldn't even kick a ball straight. You know what I mean? So it wasn't as apparent to me about this, but it had obviously come on your wife's radar as a pediatrician and as somebody who is a very involved parent in the world of soccer, competitive soccer. So what has happened here? And the part that bothers me the most is it's showing no signs of stopping, even though there's agreement among all the people, every single person you talk to, every expert, whether you talk to doctors, pediatricians, athletic trainers, everybody agrees that this multi-sport athlete has given way to this simultaneous sport athlete, meaning that you no longer have, like we wanted to put my son in baseball and in soccer. Can't do it. Can't do it. There's no way you can have soccer and some other sport, at least not in the city of Toronto. I think, somebody was suggesting to me in Vancouver because of the weather, it's still an option. But soccer goes year round, as do many, many sports. You can now play hockey year round. You can now, and people go, oh, that's so great. This reminds me of we're trying to watermelon in like February and stuff. Certain things should be in certain seasons. And part of it is an entitlement on the part of the parents. We want to be able to practice all year round. Okay. However, a larger part, I believe, has to do with the greed of these organizations. They want to make money and it has become a racket. And if I, as a parent, go, you know what? Out of fear of my child getting a repetitive strain injury, I'm going to take him or her out for 3 months and play some other sport. All of a sudden you start to be like, oh man, but then there's like team bonding that's not happening.
Depriving them of this. Yeah.
In the end, that worry about depriving, it can very easily be replaced by a new worry, which is the injury that your kid gets because of they keep doing the same movement all the time, 5 to 7 days a week. So it's kind of insane. And people generally know it's an issue and they seem to be ignoring it. And despite all the good advice about it. So I was reading this article that has some advice and I can bring that up later. But right now, I'd rather you to get a medical opinion at this point about repetitive strain, repetitive stress. Is it as much of a concern as I'm, trying to make it?
Yeah, it is.
It is.
And so,
good.
Yeah,
First
so
and
you're
foremost,
right.
Justified. I would hope so. The news came from your wife.
Imagine. No, she's full of crap.
Tell me why this happens. Because we also think about young kids and they're malleable and, they heal so quickly and all this stuff. So this kind of flies in the face of that.
Yeah, for
Why
sure.
are they at risk for these injuries?
Yeah, let's talk about it. And by the way, just so we're clear, like Wayne Gretzky, the greatest hockey player who's lived, used to play baseball every summer.
Mario Lemieux, but anyway, it's not important. Yes.
What's that?
Mario Lemieux is the greatest, but it doesn't, in my opinion, these are...
Okay, but I don't know what Mario Lemieux did in the summer. We can look that up. But Gretzky definitely played baseball. In fact, he kind of wanted to do baseball a bit more when he was younger than hockey, and then he just...
There's hundreds of examples of athletes now in their 30s, late 20s to 50s, 60s who did that. Then we're talking about the greats, the LeBrons and remember Bo Jackson? The guy could play like 3 sports, and Pascal Siakam on the Raptors. It was soccer and basketball. Thought he wanted to be a soccer star, in fact. Yeah, there's lots of cases. And I think over time we're going to hear less and less stories about those athletes who play different
Unfortunately,
sports.
yeah. So the problem is, if you just look at the bigger picture, from a cultural standpoint, we've created this environment where success in sports is to develop an elite athlete and winning at all costs, as opposed to the development of physical health, right? That's what, remember, we want the kids outside playing, keeping up their physical fitness, liking athletics, for health benefits, right? But the issue is, as you said, people are playing one sport year round, and young athletes, they're growing. And so that actually puts them at more risk than adults. And so you can impair growth by having these injuries, and it can lead to long-term health problems. So there's a bunch of reasons for this, and I'm going to go over some things that can put you at risk for these overuse or repetitive strain injuries. So one of them is development. So the human bodies are not fully developed into their late teens. So young athletes are more at risk for these repetitive strain injuries. And one of the areas involves something called the growth plate. So the growth plate is the areas of new bone growth in children and teens, but they're made of cartilage, not bone. Okay? We all know cartilage is our ears and our nose, right? They're not bones, right? So they're not as strong. So it's weaker than solid bone, so it just makes it more likely to get injured. And we'll go through some of the specific things that can happen a lot in these kids, and you'll see how these areas of growth plates can really be affected. The other problem is, as you said, we just specialize in one sport year round. So that puts near constant stress on the same areas of the body all the time. There's also some evidence that athletes who participated in individualized sports, so tennis, gymnastics, running, dancing, are more prone to overuse injuries because they don't play with a team. So maybe they train more intensely because they don't have anybody to kind of gauge their skills off of, and they got to do everything on their own.
Sure. If you think of a tennis player, it's constant, right? Whereas a soccer player, there's downtime when the ball is not close to you, you're resting, you're, just kind of in a slow jog sometimes, and then you pick up, right? Yeah, you can definitely visualize that, especially tennis comes to mind. That strain must be insane.
Some other things that can happen is diet. And I know some people might be thinking, oh, yeah, they have an unhealthy diet, so that predisposes them because they're eating junk food because they're teens. But that's not what they mean. We mean the opposite. Athletes may restrict their diet because they may not be getting enough nutrition to keep their muscles, joints, bones healthy. You don't have calcium, you don't have vitamin D, iron deficiency in female athletes. You might not be paying attention to these things in terms of getting adequate nutrition, and that can predispose you to problems.
I mean, you could also be talking about junk food, right? Junk food also results in inadequate nutrition.
Yeah, I guess if you're not keeping up with your calories,
Sure. You're saying restricting calories specifically means
Yeah, exactly. Or yeah. And of course, the social supports too. So young athletes who lack a good social support network are at risk for overuse injuries because you could think if they have low self-esteem, they may be driving themselves more and more and more and more into their sport and then creating these overuse injuries. So a good social support, good peer group is important for these athletes. It shouldn't just be the sport to the exclusion of everything else, which I think, you can think about all these things that we're talking about that the parents can have an influence on, right?
Yeah.
All those things, there's also some non-modifiable risk factors. So when a growth spurt occurs, you can't control that, or your body size, and definitely a history of previous injury. It's the strongest predictor of future injuries. So this is important, right? It's making sure that parents, players, and coaches are not making these athletes, these young athletes, play through injuries, right? Because that's going to predict your risk of developing further injuries down the road.
As you talk about this, I'm thinking about another probably podcast episode that we can do, which is the psychological element of being injured, in the sense that if your entire identity is, I am a soccer player, right? Or I am a musician, whatever it is, and if you lose your ability to do that, I mean, you do some real soul searching and you can spiral into a bad place as well.
Listen, Ali knows a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, I fell and dislocated my shoulder, not playing sports or anything. And I was depressed for a couple of months just with that. And I'm not an athlete. You know what I mean? Can you imagine if that is your be all and end all is playing these sports and you get an injury like this? I mean, it is much weigh on people so much. I totally agree. But, there are things you can do, right, to help. And this has been documented. And I know, a lot of our friends are physiotherapists and they advocate for this. So flexibility, strength training, these are important things to do to, strengthen the other muscles, improve your flexibility, and not overtraining, because we know that excessive training loads can lead to this physical fatigue, like fatiguing of your muscles. And if you continue participating in sport once you're fatigued like that, that will increase your risk of injury. And so this is where the coaching becomes so important, right?
Yeah. I was going to ask you about what type of injuries are the most common. What do you see most?
Yeah. So a lot of this is the repetitive stress injuries. So that's basically what it sounds like, a chronic overuse injury because of you're stressing these muscles, joints, bones without adequate recovery time in between. So I think we all know that. It depends what you're doing. Swinging a tennis racket will be different than a swimmer, will be different than a soccer player. Mm-hmm. And overuse is about half of all pediatric sports injuries.
I think people would be interested in hearing examples of what type of injuries are seen. You put swimming in there, so obviously that is different, but I think, you're using your lower body quite a bit in most sports, from tennis to soccer to hockey. So what kind of stuff do you see?
It's true. It's funny you say that because swimming is a huge leg predominant sport, but
you're just not prone to injury in your legs.
Yeah, as much as your arms. Yeah, with the overuse. Okay, so I'll give you a few examples. So one is the Sever's disease. So this causes a chronic heel pain.
Severs,
Sever, apostrophe
Dude,
S.
that's a terrible name.
Because it's severe, but not quite severe.
And it's like severing an arm from the rest of the body. Dude, you gotta get this Dr. Severs or whoever the scientist is, get their name out of there.
So you have a growth plate in the heel bone, which is called the calcaneus, okay? And again, so you're getting inflammation and injury to this growth plate. So things that involve your heel striking the ground a lot. So running, jumping, that type of thing that could cause this Sever's disease. Another one is Osgood-Schlatter disease. This is pretty common. It's probably out of all these the ones that we hear about the most. So this is where you have pain right in front of the knee, kind of like right below your kneecap. There's an area called the tibial tubercle. Right, it's a little bump right below your kneecap, and that's where that area gets pain.
They're both called diseases?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I thought these were injuries.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know. We call them diseases in medicine.
Yeah, I know why you call them diseases. Anyway, okay. All right.
So you get some inflammation there. You can also get a different one called jumper's knee, which is also called Sinding-Larsen-Johansson disease. I think you prefer to call it jumper's knee, I believe.
Yeah, I do. With the respect to the Larsen-Johansson families. Yeah, I'm going with jumper's knees.
Don't forget Sinding. Sinding. This is also the knee. It's the lower portion of your kneecap or patella. So right below where your bony part of your kneecap is, you can feel down. So it's that kind of tendon there. So that's from repetitive contraction of your quad where it attaches to the kneecap. So you can also call it patellar tendonitis. Again, this is a common one that can happen. And of course, we talked about these like overhand throwing for baseball. They have to be very careful for pitchers or anybody who's doing this overhand throwing. So that can be usually elbow injuries, and there can be different parts of your elbow that can be injured with different activities. We don't have to get into those minutiae. And then probably the biggest one that you hear about, I think, Ali, is for runners. They can get stress fractures, right? Yeah. And this is when, again, the muscles become fatigued. Okay, so now you're overexerting your muscles. They transfer this overload of their stress and the fatigue on the muscles to the bones, right? And so this stress is being placed on them. They can't build up bone fast enough to compensate for this, and then the bone fails, and then you get a small crack, which is a stress fracture.
We're not calling it stress fracture disease just yet?
No.
Yeah, big F you to the medical community for that, by the way. Think about what that means to a kid to say you have this disease. It's immensely unnecessary versus like this is something that's, curable over time. You can work on it. Whereas there's a disease, I mean, really, just creating extra
Ali will write his letters in who he's writing them to.
I'll write them in blood. In blood, I'll write them.
Boy. Anyways, you can imagine this is usually these stress fractures are in the weight-bearing bones of the lower leg or the foot. And remember, they take like 6 to 8 weeks to heal usually. So you cannot do activity during that time. So sometimes you need to wear a cast or a brace, right? You've seen people with or a walking boot. You've seen those, right?
Sure.
Because they need to rest the injured bones.
Yeah. Our friend who's an orthopedic surgeon was saying to me, often when a young kid sprain their ankle, he puts them in a boot. Why? Because kids don't understand the value of resting, aren't able to rest. So you're just like, the only way this kid's going to rest their foot, because they want to run around, they have all this energy, you got to put them in a boot. So sometimes it probably feels unnecessary, but it is necessary for that 6 to 8 weeks of healing or whatever it is. Yeah. Right. So let's talk about solutions, because presently, the most obvious solution is you take your child out of certain sports and put them in other sports and mix it up, right? Variety would be a good thing. Not always possible for a variety of reasons, whether your team or the organization or, the families and friends that you've made along the way are making you feel like you can't. You should if you can. So what else can we do barring that?
Yeah, I mean, this is the advice. Again, it's from lots of the sports organizations, the sports medicine organizations and orthopedic surgeons. Some of them are American recommendations, so they may be slightly different in Canada. So, for example, they say get a preseason sports physical, and a lot of teams, I guess, require that in the U.S. That is not a common thing in Canada. We don't do kind of these physicals for sports teams, camps, etc. It's just not done very often in Canada because the government is not interested in paying for these types of things. So that's not very common, but it happens more in the U.S., I believe. And then one of the main things is to promote cross-training and variety. As you said, a single sport all year round will cause these repetitive stress injuries and burnout in young athletes, right? The variety is also good for that point of view. And so it's kind of cross-training, right? They said proper cross training means limiting your child to one sport per season and encouraging them to try different activities from one season to the next. And so it obviously prevents the overuse, but it also makes them stronger. And there's lots of evidence that suggests that cross-training athletes who do multiple sports are overall better athletes than the ones who specialize in just one area. Another thing you have to do is promote pain-free sports play. Okay, so a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm injured. I'm going to work through my injury. I'm just going to keep going and just push through it." That's not what should be happening. And again, this is the patients and the athletes need to do that, but definitely the parents and coaches need to also reinforce that. And some people say you have to build in periods of rest and cross training. So in a year, you should schedule 2 or 3 months of scheduled rest away from training and competition. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to necessarily like sit around for a month, 3 times a year. But they say that there's different things. So as you're getting ready for, say, your season, say your soccer season, you get ready by building strength, improving movements. My personal trainer talks about, getting ready for these explosive type movements, because if your body's not used to doing these sudden movements, that's where you can get an injury, right? I mean, I think Ali and I both have many friends who've torn their Achilles tendon because they're like, yeah, let's go playing soccer. Let's go start playing football with the guys. And they end up with like an injury and they're out of commission for a long time. So you need to kind of get into that. Then the season, you maintain those skills. Then when the season is over, they say, you need this period of relative rest, but you don't have to be doing nothing. You could do strength training, core training, improve flexibility, work on your proximal muscles, so your shoulder girdle muscles, your hip girdle muscles, strengthen those. So there's ways to do it where you're not sitting around doing nothing, but you're just training different things and not doing the same thing every time. And of course, the last thing is eating properly, like we talked about. So athletes can skip meals or they can rely on meal supplements all the time, right? Like, protein shakes, protein bars, but you don't want to end up causing a nutritional deficiency. And then you have to be careful, right? People who have restrictive diets, so gluten-free diets, you may not be getting the calories that you need if you're an athlete, vegetarian or vegan diets. There's nothing wrong with that, but you really need to be making sure you're getting adequate protein and iron, not just for your daily life, but now you're expending even more calories. So
it takes a blood test to figure that out, I believe, right? If you want to really figure out if you have enough protein, iron in particular, you
not
want to
necessarily. You can figure out your protein requirements just by looking. You can calculate that based on your body weight and the amount of activity you do to see if you're iron deficient. Sometimes doctors can just make that clinically, depending on your symptoms. You have paleness or women who have heavy periods. Like they can sometimes just figure that out and say, this is most likely why you're fatigued all the time. Sometimes you need a blood test for the iron. And there's something called relative energy deficiency in sport called RED-S, where it's a syndrome. Again, Ali's upset that we're labeling this a syndrome. But you have this imbalance between athletes' energy expenditure and nutritional caloric intake, which you can, imagine that's a serious problem. Again, you're spending more calories than you're taking in, and then that's going to lead to definitely poor athletic performance, but overall poor health. And of course, that's when you can get into a type of eating disorder because you're expending more energy than you're taking in. So that's another important thing to consider.
There's something I'd like to add to this as we're just wrapping it up, which is from this website called ilovetowatchyouplay.com. And this is an article about this multi-simultaneous sport athletes and what they should be doing.
Can I interrupt for you for a second? Hopefully people know why that website is called that. I've never been to that website, but hopefully people know why. Because when your child, this is separate from the medical aspect of things.
Yeah.
When your child finishes doing a sport, the most important thing you should tell them is, I love to watch you play, and that's it. Your job is to not be their coach and give them feedback on what they did well, what they didn't do well. Your joy of watching them play, that's what will foster this idea of I am playing sports for the enjoyment of it and to improve a healthy lifestyle. So sorry, that was an aside. Go ahead.
No, I have a friend who said, when he was young, his least favorite part about playing sports was the drive home with his father. because his father would be like, why are you not this fast? And why are you not this? And you're not, and this is also like an immigrant parent who applied the, 95 is not good enough, 100, applied that to sports. This is not just your classic, white bread, tough athlete stereotype. This is, everybody can fall into this no matter where they're from. I mean, this is a man who'd never even played sports, but he would make his sons drive home miserable. And I heard that story when my kids were at a young age. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to be committed to not doing that. But yeah, that's a very valuable addition also. So things that simultaneous sport athletes should be doing according to this website. Number one, get 8+ hours of rest per night.
Good point.
I mentioned that also because you didn't, and I encourage people to look up Tom Brady, okay? Award-winning, much celebrated quarterback, and LeBron James, okay? One of the best ball players, if not the best to ever play the game. Look at their rest schedules. I mean, rest is maybe the most important thing to offset all the other things that they do or compensate for all the other things that they do. Their rest schedules are insane. It's well over 10 hours of rest a day. They've spent millions of dollars to ensure that they have like these systems in place and products in place to help their rest. And, I see it even at a young age. I don't want to call out any of the parents who are the fantastic parents that I've met, but I remember one of the parents saying like, yeah, he was up late playing video games with his buddies yesterday. And guess what? As he was playing, he looked like a kid who was up late playing video games. Like, it's a very quick, it's super apparent. Rest helps and lack of rest doesn't. Another thing is, I don't know what you know about this, but you can incorporate active recovery and foam rolling techniques, right? These are things that can, when they're done correctly, so this has to be, don't just watch like one video or anything like that, get the proper instruction, but these can, relieve muscle tightness and soreness and increase your range of motion and obviously assist in preventing injury long-term. Number 3, stay hydrated. Very important, the amount that these kids are sweating. They probably don't even know. Sometimes I wasn't really sweating. Yeah, but you were standing out in a field for 90 minutes baking, like you probably want to, right? So there's a lot of guidelines people can look up for how much their kids should be hydrating, but it's probably more than they already are. We can definitely say that. Number 4, they say, in line with what you were talking about, Asif, about taking time off from a sport, these guys say you take 2 days completely off of each sport every week. So 5 days on, 2 days off. And again, talking about the racket of sports, very difficult. And, hockey especially, oh, good, we're only playing 3 times this week. All of a sudden, a shooting school thing came up, right? And let's add that. Oh, we got ice time. Anybody want? And like, you want to be. You become that person. You're like, oh, God, yeah, I guess we'll go for the ice time, They love it. They love practicing, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I hear... The amount of times I hear that from parents, oh, they love it. They love it. They being the kids.
But what's the long term?
Like, did they love it? And, the problem is a lot of this is, again, we're kind of moving away from the medicine and more to the psychology of it. There is this level of anxiety that is causing this. It's not just the aspirations, I want my kid to be an NHL player or a Major League Baseball player. I think it's this anxiety that if I don't take advantage, I'm a bad parent. They're going to be unhappy. They won't be as good as the other kids if I don't take advantage of the extra practice and paying for this. And let's do the dry land training for hockey. Let's do that. Okay. Oh, there's an extra weightlifting course. Let's try that. You have to always do these extra things. So I think there's this level of anxiety that people have to look at internally and see the reasons why they're making these decisions. But sorry.
Yeah, very well said. Not at all. Very valuable interjection there. We've been going through all this as well, and we know for next year, there won't be any hockey in summer. There just won't be. We were trying to keep them in the game and keep them a little bit loose and Friday night hockey and all this. Screw it. We're just not going to do it. We'll put him in a camp for 5 days at the end of the summer to get him sort of, back into the motion. And that's what we did this. And I think full 3 months off. I think planning it ahead of time. We are now, whatever we are, we're the late fall and we're thinking about next summer. I think that's what you got to do. Because as a parent, sometimes you need to sort of brainwash yourself into remembering this is important. Remember, this is important to us. And it's something we've said on this podcast before. And I don't remember the context, but 70% of children will quit sports at age 13. 13 is our coach has told us that, our coach, now I'm being, my son's coach has told us that. He's well aware. Everybody's ready for that. They just leave. And I think we're preparing ourselves mentally that might be the case as well. But yeah, kids themselves need to be aware of, possibility of burnout, all those clues your body gives you for burnout.
Exactly.
Exhaustion.
And you'd rather, I'm not saying they have to continue being like an elite athlete, but you want them to still enjoy exercise in sports and incorporate that into their daily lifestyle. That's the goal. If that's the goal, then them quitting sports completely at age 13 is unfortunate, right? And so you want to prevent, as you're saying, that burnout or that dislike of sports from occurring.
I'm in a different boat with the kid who plays hockey in our house. I'm like, please quit before age 13. For God's sake, I don't want to be in these stupid towns every weekend in these dumb tournaments where all these parents are like trying to act like all big and bad. Like, you're not cool, dude. You're living through your 8-year-old. All right. There's nothing cool about it. I hate the hockey culture so much. And then, of course, hitting is introduced to the game by the time they're like 12 or 13. I pray that my son hates hockey, and I'm open to your suggestions how to make my son hate hockey. At 13 they start beating each other with sticks in the locker room. Any kind of propaganda, I'm open to it. We'll replace that with different sports, but I got to get this kid out of hockey. He just likes it too much is the problem.
And rant. That's our episode for today. Let us know what you thought. A lot of us talking about our opinions, so hopefully that was okay. I mean, that's kind of what we do in every episode, but some scientific evidence there as well with regards to these repetitive strain injuries in young athletes. Let us know any other questions you guys had about YouTube. Promise we're not going to do another YouTube episode for a long time now, unless somebody dies or something in the band. Whoops. But I think there are some more areas to explore, as Ollie was saying, about these injuries in athletes. For example, young women in their teens have one of the highest rates of ACL tears, right? We think, it's going to be like NFL players or whatever, but it happens a lot. So the reasons for that are also important. So that could be another episode. Let us know if that's something you guys are interested in hearing about. Dr. V Comedian on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We are everywhere. Or email us, drvcomedian@gmail.com. But remember that though I'm a doctor, I'm not your doctor. Medical issues we talk about are for your interest and information only, and they're not medical advice. Please consult your medical professionals for actual medical advice. Also remember that Ali Hassan is not a coach, physiotherapist, or personal trainer.
True story. I can't even argue with any of that. Don't want to be, am not qualified to be. Bye!